So this talk is creating the right developer community for your company, which changes depending on what you're looking for and what you need and how old your community is. So hopefully this will be a nice interactive talk. So if you have questions, feel free to interrupt me. I am here to make sure that this is as clear and concise and that you get the information you need to be successful with community. Community is a passion of mine. My name is Wesley Faulkner. I've been doing community for a very long time. I've done it for startups. I've done it for large enterprises. I've done it for nonprofits. I've done it for temporary projects, and I've done it for rehashing or rehauling long existing communities that need a revamp. So I've done every different kind of iteration of community, but there's still tons out there, more being developed every single day. And hopefully I can bring some of that experience to you. I have at the bottom a list of logos that kind of like show that, hey, I'm legit. But one thing that you might look up is where I currently work, which is the company AWS, is Amazon Web Services. One thing I want to start off at the very, very top. I'm here as an independent actor. I'm not here to represent the company. None of my content, none of my views is representing the company. So I know this is a vendor-heavy conference, but I'm actually not representing any vendors at this moment, just myself. So consider everything I say is agnostic and not really relevant to my current role or my current position. Clear? All right, good. I want to start off just to figure out where you are in your community journey, and also this track is for developer relations and community. So I'm going to do a poll / quiz just to see what you've absorbed over the couple 2 days that you've been here. So raise your hand if you know what developer marketing is. Okay. All right. I see about 7 max hands. Raise your hand if you know what developer relations is. Oh, okay, more hands. Okay, that's about 10, 12 dozen. Raise your hand if you know what a developer advocate is. Okay, about 7 hands again. All right, here's the coup d'etat. Raise your hand if you know what a community manager is. Okay, all right, awesome. So let me go over these terms because I would like for you to understand how this fits related to all these other terms, like in the company, in your company, or if you've heard it in some of the talks you've been in, or some you might go to. So developer marketing, what's the difference between developer marketing and regular marketing? One has developer in front of it. But that's but the fact is developers are a little different than other people. Developers don't really understand or feel like they can relate to general marketing because general marketing is it's more for bespoke, not sorry, for more for like general things that people can easily change in and out. So if you want a new toilet paper, maybe you'll fall for general marketing because if you don't like it, you just don't use it anymore and you switch to something else. But developers, they choose to get their tools and their systems in a way that is like a well-oiled machine. Just like if you know someone who's buying a car, they're like, I like the color, I'm going to buy that. But then you know someone who's a gearhead and they will open up the manual. They will see about the how the maintenance of the vehicle is, what kind of parts it uses, what configuration the engine is to figure out if they have to change the clutch or they have to change out a piston, what they need to do to get to that part. So because if it goes bad, they want to be able to fix it themselves. They want to know how often they need to rotate the tires, what kind of spark plugs it uses, all of the stuff. And developers are more towards the gearhead side rather than the person who likes the pretty car because it sparkles in the sunlight. The reason for that, why you have these specific developer marketing as opposed to marketing, is because if you say we're the fastest, if you say we're the best, that's more generalized. When you talk to an engineer and say we're the fastest, they'll say fastest at what? We're the quickest when, under what conditions, what data load, all of that stuff. So it's all the depends answer is where you're coming from when you're talking about developer marketing. And so you have to know your audience. And so it's a specialty of being the right amount of technical to be able to present and encapsulate the type of marketing that will appeal to the developer mindset. Does that make sense? Is that clear? I know I use a lot of words and stuff. Next, let's talk about developer relations. So when you hear developer relations, you think sometimes, if you know what developer relations are, that they sometimes are underneath marketing, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're under product, sometimes they're under the CTO. It all depends on what you need the person to do. Developer relations is a department, and a developer advocate is a person that works under the department. So if you think of a sales organization, a salesperson is under that org. If you think of a product organization, a product manager would be under that org. It's the same with a developer advocate. When you think of an individual that works under developer relations, they work and they are a developer advocate. Now, developer advocates have multiple jobs. But let's go what developer relations is. Developer relations is the part of the company that actually talk to the people that use or will use your product. And if you're trying to figure out, okay, that sounds like marketing, or it sounds like customer service, or if it sounds like sales, or if it sounds like product exploration, it's like all of those wrapped into one person. Anyone seen James Bond? Know what James Bond is? Okay. So when you watch a James Bond movie and James Bond is going into casino, everybody knows James Bond is a spy. But they talk to him, they welcome him in, they invite him out to parties because he's cool. They relate to him. They are able to speak the same language. I'm not going to say all developer advocates are like James Bond, just the ones in front of the mics. But what you do is you find someone who's able to ingratiate themselves with the community, ingratiates themselves with the people, and be able to speak their language so that they tell them stuff. They say, oh, your product sucks, or your product is great here, or we're running into some problem. And then they, from the outside, they really seem like they know how to have those conversations with the people. And then take that learning, bring it into the company, talk to product saying we need to make these changes. Talk to customer service saying we need to fix this part. Talk to the people who run the UI and say we need to move this button or change the color. They are the ones who are able to kind of bring the abstract data. Like if you're looking at, graph goes up, you need to know why. You need to know what is the thing that makes it do that. And that's what a developer advocate does. And developer advocates have several different jobs. They can write blog posts. They can give speeches and talks at conferences. They can do live streams on Twitch. They can be on YouTube and TikTok. They can write documentation. They can do whatever it is where it's the touch point between the company and the users. And a community manager is a person that is a developer advocate in developer relations optimally. And the community manager would make sure that they embrace the people who are using the product or can use the product, but group them together in a way that makes them sticky around your company or organization or a product. And this is kind of what that talks about. So, clear as mud? So that's a lot. And now that we understand what developer relations is, what developer advocate does, and what developer marketing is, you can understand how they all kind of fit together. They all work with each other. Someone who's a community manager might reference developer marketing to say, oh, here's a spec sheet. Here is a white paper. They could talk to another developer advocate saying, oh, we'll change that documentation or add that exception, or here's a code snippet you can run. All right. And the reason why you need a technical community manager in DevRel is because you still want them to be able to relate to the people they're talking to. All right. I know that's a lot. It's a big preamble, but let's get to the meat of this stuff. Let's talk about community, but let's talk about what's not a community. So I'm sure everyone here knows what a community is or heard that term, but let me tell you what a community is not. The reason why this is important is because a lot of people hear the word community just like they hear the word, I don't know, love. And they said, oh yeah, I know love. I've experienced love, or I'm part of a community, or sure, that's interesting. Send that to the community, or let's go talk to the community. And so these are ways that I've heard them misused, but this is only part of the story. And I will get to that later, but let's talk about why these are not community in and themselves. A forum. A forum is not necessarily a community because usually a forum where you stick your facts and your knowledge, or people ask questions and people get their questions asked. So if you've ever gone to Google and you say, how do I do this? And then you get a result, are you experiencing community? No, but you're experiencing a service that gets you what you want, which is the answer to your question. And that's what a lot of forums are. How many users can I use? What can I do with the API? Or has anyone seen this problem? They care about the answer, getting the answer, and then getting out. Communities aren't just a knowledge base. They are an experience. So that's why a forum in itself, if you set it up, it's not a community. Social media. Have you ever heard of someone say, hey, let's tweet that, the community will love that? Or let's put that on social, the community will eat this up, or this is something that they need to know. I'm sure several of us here are on social and several of us here follow companies, but do you yourself consider yourself part of their community? I mean, you might hear or be interested in what they're saying, but you're not having that back and forth with them in which you're having a conversation. And if they said, hey, this is new in version 5.x97, you might use that information. You might even say, hey, that's cool. But do they say, yeah, it's cool, back to you? No, there's no conversation. And because it's one way, it's a broadcast channel for most companies, that type of social is not a community. It's a megaphone. It's like any other advertising at that point. Same with YouTube. If you go to YouTube and there is a monthly dispatch, or they're saying here's an update and this is for the community, that in itself is not a community because once again, it's a broadcast. Are they reading the comments? Are they answering questions? Are they responding? If they're not doing any of the things that show that they're actually listening to you, it's not a community. So if you are in a space and they say, let's make this video, the community demands it, just realize that it's not necessarily an action, or the people you're speaking to may not be considered your community. And last but not least, I hear this all the time. Sometimes people think that paying customers are a community. I would hopefully this is the easiest one, but this is the one that gets confused the most. Everyone's wearing clothes, right? Okay. All right. Some of you are wearing brands. I'm guessing you're not part of the community for every single brand that you buy. If you stop at a gas station, are you part of that community? Or if you get fast food, are you part of that community? How many of you use Amazon? Do you consider yourself part of the Amazon community? I mean, and a lot of companies think just because someone's a customer, they're part of the community, and that is not true whatsoever. It's just a transaction. Community involves deeper involvement. Has anyone heard that before? Okay. The reason why I want to emphasize this is because community is a dictionary term. You can look up in the dictionary the word community and you can get several different answers. And people will see it like a Rorschach test of saying that's community because they don't really understand the meaning of the word. Community can be as small as 2 people or as big as the whole entire world. And so if you're working in community, or if you're thinking about being in a community or starting a community or describing your own community, you need to make a definition of what's in and what's out. All right, let's move to the next section where we're talking about, now we know what's not in a community. Let's talk about what's the ingredients for a good, successful community. And the reason why I'm moving to this from that is you can see how the previous examples do not have this, okay? Peer-to-peer interaction. Are people themselves talking amongst themselves? In the first example with the forum, people might be responding to a query, but that is less of an interaction and more of a transaction. That's people not really relating from a point of deepening their understanding of each other. This is just getting the information. If you've ever heard the difference between like going to a restaurant or getting a home-cooked meal, those are different transactions. One's for money, one's for care and feeding. Next is a clear core interest. When you think about some of those outlets, like social media, someone's like, I'm not just on Instagram just to talk to you. They're on Instagram to talk to everyone or to see their friends' pictures or the post themselves. And so if they are not going there to seek a technical community, if they're not going there to seek a data community or the thing that is their core, their niche, then that is not necessarily a community. If they go to your forum, that checks that box, right? They want to go and understand, how do I use your product better? How do I solve this problem? Or what problems other people are having that I can help solve? That is closest to a community, but still, because of the core interest is surfaced, but it is not checking all the boxes. And the reason why is individual expression. Let's listen here. I bet several of you probably are part of some club around something, a TV show, a religious belief, or a hobby. And what makes those communities special, or the sticky part of it, or the thing that like you go back for to the people, is not because they're just like you. It's because the little things that cause them to be a little bit different. But you know you have that base level understanding that you don't have to cover over and over and over again. How many of you have problems explaining what you do for your job when you meet someone new, right? You got to figure out what level of abstraction. Like I was like, for me, it's like, well, I work with user groups. Oh, you don't mind. Well, I work with community. So I'm in developer relation. Oh gosh. So AWS. Oh, have you heard of Amazon? And so I have to figure out like where I need to go, even start that conversation. And like after they've fallen asleep, I walk away. But it's nice to go to people who you know and you care for, and they care for you. And then you don't have to say, "Oh God, I was on call last week and it was horrible." And they're like, and they won't. You won't get the question back. What's on call? Pager? You have a pager? No, it's not. It's pager duty. It's like, no, okay. And so being a part of a community is not the thing that, it is what binds you, and what brought you there is the thing that gets you in the place. But what keeps you in the place is the people and their self-expression, and how they show they care, and how they show that they're aligned on other different interests, and how they bring that into the community. That bring articles, that bring posts, that bring XKCD cartoons that shows exactly what you're dealing with. Those are the type of things of self-expression that make you want to go back. When you are going there just mindlessly opening up an app or logging on to a service or bookmarking a place because you want to go there for the people as well as the information and knowledge, that's when you're getting closer to a community. And no community is good without moderation. I like to explain community as a big, thick border so that you know who's in, but you also have that border to keep the other people out. And if someone violates your rules, someone violates your trusts, someone who is not one of us anymore, there needs to be someone who's enforcing that. It can't be on the community members because that's awkward. So you need moderation to be able to define those rules to make sure that whoever is not part of the group anymore, that they get kicked out, and also make sure that not every Joe Schmo can just join just because they found you on the internet. You want that moderation to keep the community healthy. Without that check, then it could fall into chaos, or someone who's an influencer in that community could just take it over. And you don't want that either, because you'll lose power and you lose control. So it's important to have moderation in a community. Okay, any questions? All right. I'm assuming every time I say there's any questions and no one raises their hand, that means I'm doing amazing and I get 5 out of 5 stars. Okay, let's talk about the different kinds of community, because that's kind of the core of the talk. Like, what communities will suit you? Let's talk about the options that are out there. This is not an exhaustive list, but this at least gets you like a baseline of ones that you might be familiar with, and you also might be instituting or think about instituting in the near future. Let's talk about the ambassador program. Now, this is like, if you're going to go all out, that's what you need. You want people out there talking about you without you even telling them. They are your advocates. They're the ones who are evangelizing you, and they're the ones who are telling their friends, hey, if you're not using this, I don't know what's wrong with you. This program is pretty up there, but it's one that's fairly effective if you're able to get one going. Anyone here heard of champions programs or heroes programs? Yeah. And those are the people who are out there not only talking about your company, but in a way they represent your company. So it's important to vet these people the most, because if you don't want a Jared from Subway out there representing your company, because it could get messy, and then you have to just say, well, how did they get in? Did you vet them? And you lose the patina of being the upper echelon of the representative of the company when it feels as if anyone can just go out there and just say, hey, I'll talk about you. Can I be part of your ambassador program? So it's great visibility, but also great liability. So keep that in mind. Next is a newsletter. Everyone is probably familiar with the newsletters. You probably got 12 this morning. And if you went into the vendor booth, you might be getting some more. Newsletters are great because they are sometimes one person can author that, and then it gets sent to many. The question is, or if you remember, we talked about how things are not community, and this is quickly one that could be on that list. But let me tell you why a newsletter can be a community. If it has that thing that I talked to you about, if there's uniqueness, you're highlighting people from the community, you're bringing them in, you're getting their feedback, they're asking questions, you're answering those questions, you're highlighting those specific names, you're talking about their situation, people are relating to that, and people feel that they are getting a push and a pull from the newsletter. If it's just a printing of this is a newsletter, this is what's new, and it just turns into another broadcast medium, which is not what you want. So, but if you actually want community, make sure you have those elements that I mentioned before. And I brought up a forum before. Same. You can have a forum and have a community. The forum is the tool. It's the way that you use it that makes it an actual community. Are you asking what people are doing? Are you asking what their problems are? Are you saying, hey, did you have a good week? Or are you celebrating anything during the New Year's? Are you going to a big party? If you're bringing out that uniqueness in people by allowing them the space to talk about that, if you have an off-topic channel, all those are different ways that you can bring forth what the community is doing. If you are in a highly technical community, you can ask, what are you working on? What are the projects you're tinkering with? What are some of the certifications you're going for? What helped you level up to where you are now? Being able to help people from the community by lifting up those can be an inspiration to others, or someone further in their journey that you can point to and say, this is the path that they took, and give that help to other people in the community. Those are the type of actions that you want in a forum. And I mentioned social media and how it's not a community. Surprise, it can be. Once again, it's a medium, it's the tool, not just how you use it, not what you use, but how you use it. So are you doing the same thing I mentioned for the newsletters and the forums by having that give and take, responding to people, following people back, hitting like on some of their messages and their replies. Those are ways that you can use social media for community actions. And of course, I have user groups in here because that's kind of like my bread and butter. User groups are groups of people that not only go out there and talk about your product, your service, but they bring people in. They give the nice handshake, the warm smile, sometimes pizza and a beer, depending on the type of place. It's where people can have a first and lasting impression in the area physically where they are. There are virtual user groups as well, where people can just gather on a regular basis, once a month, once a week, once a quarter, same location, different location. But if you ever thought about how you leave like an organization, and realizing that it's leaving the people behind, a user group is a good manifestation of why people, once they switch jobs, once they switch careers, they still might stay in their user group because they are there for the community and they have that shared interest that they go back to over and over again. And then after a certain amount of scale with a company, you might actually need to do an internal community. So this is something that people don't really talk about all that much, is that when you are working at a company and someone's doing sales for product A and another one's doing sales for product B and someone's a product owner for product C and then someone's doing customer service for product D, they have information that they could share amongst each other. If you bump into someone on the way to the bathroom or at the cafeteria in a virtual world, that doesn't happen as much. There's a lot of return to office politics about saying that that's something that people are missing because of where we are in this remote world. But you can still find a way to bring community in a team, outside the team, different departments, so that you can have that synergy, you can have that same kind of a cohesion, and also information sharing. I can't tell you how many times that I've heard, oh, we're launching this product? Well, we're launching this product. We should work together, or we should coordinate launches, or you're working with this partner and I'm working with this partner. We should get together and we can do an event, or we can do some co-marketing, which was mentioned before. All those different things can happen with an internal community to make sure that you can break down some of those silos, those barriers, those walls, so that collaboration can work better between everyone. Okay. Yes.
Can I just brag a second?
About me? Sure. Go.
For our internal community, I've made a battleship tournament. There's a browser game you can play battleship against someone else,
Uh-huh.
and we randomly selected people who wanted to be part of it, and that people they would never have spoken to, and that's really helped with cohesion within the company, and that's a nice way of doing it without it being just on the product, but still.
Oh, that's awesome. So if you didn't hear, she set up, Battleship. I presume your pronouns. Is that okay? Okay. They set up Battleship. It's a really good example of using a kind of a set of rules and a paradigm that people can understand and follow, rather than an open-ended kind of network force networking where you have icebreakers, where it could be kind of awkward, but understanding the pace and understand what the objective is, and people are going through the motions, allow them to not have that overhead, to be able to relate, which is really great. And it was opt-in, which is also really great as well. I have an internal story of my own that I did that I will share at office hours if you want more information on how to do internal community. I have a lot of examples there. Let's talk about these last two, and then we'll move forward. Slack, of course, you've heard of a lot of people spinning up a Slack, spinning up a Discord or some other chat, but you still need to make sure that you allow people to have some sort of uniqueness, meaning like avatars, meaning like emojis or any types of memes, or the same type of plugins that allow them to do some self-expression. Also, make sure that you set up the channels or default channels, or have it locked down enough that people can find a way to still express themselves given the current guidelines and the structure of the community. So, so the reason why Slack is popular is because it has an infinite kind of user base. If you're on the free plan, you just lose some some of the perks and plugins and retention of data. So keep that in mind, that if you are using a Slack community, you cannot necessarily use that as a database of fixing problems, because those problems will roll back and no one will be able to search for them after a certain period of time. You'll need to either find a way to offload that over to another database that people can use, or somehow go for the paid plan, which can be extremely expensive as you have more users. Word of warning. And of course, there's events. Yes, you have a question?
Do you have any opinions you can share on Slack versus Discord?
Slack versus Discord is a question. Yes.
Good answer.
So there's two sides of that answer. The reason for that is, one, you need to make sure that the user base is familiar with those tools, and then also the other part of that, the person who's administrating it is familiar with that tool. There are people who will just gravitate to the tool that they are more comfortable with from the administration side, and that is, and this might be controversial, that's okay, because you want someone to not necessarily have to spend their time figuring out how to use a tool. You want them to be natural and a thing that they would want to use, and it's easier for them to use. If they have to ramp up on a new tool that they're not familiar with, then that could slow everything down. But if you're in a space where your users are highly aligned to one tool, and that tool is Slack over Discord, then you need to figure out how to start using Slack, because that's going to service the users. And there's also a different approach depending on the maturity of your user group program, because you're not necessarily trying to encompass everyone that would be a user in this outlet. You just need to make sure that you can get started. So you might start off in Slack and then do a Discord and have both. But we'll get to that later. But I first lean on the community if you have data to support that they are leaning one tool or the other. Second is whatever tool the moderator or the community manager is very familiar with, and that would be a strong second. And then, of course, there's other mitigating circumstances in terms of housing it or using a host and security patches and all this other stuff that is really complicated. And so all of that from an AppSec point of view needs to be taken into account as well. All right, last one is events. Events is where you're out there, you're meeting people, you're shaking hands, kind of like this. And this is where you can kind of leap forward in terms of deepen the relationship on an accelerated basis. Email, chat, even a video call is great, but a physical event or a virtual event where you have extended time with talking to people, having dialogue, having to really get a sense of what kind of person you are or what you're about, your values, that sort of thing. Events are a really good way of really connecting with the community, for them to connect with you, because by default, it's a dialogue. No one's showing up to a webinar where it's hear only and you're just listening to talking heads. At a physical event, you are out there having that conversation. So these are just a smattering of community, but now you've heard all this stuff, but you don't know how to use it. That's totally fine. I plan for that. Let's talk about where you are in your community journey. You either have one or you don't, and if you do, you probably fit into one of these three buckets. You're either just starting out, you have one person that's in charge of maintaining this community. That person may have the title of community manager, or they may have the title of community manager plus, which is community manager plus engineer or customer service or whatever. They're doing a whole bunch of things because it's either a startup or this is a brand new position that they're testing out, or even a contractor that works part-time. So if you're just starting out, you're probably going to have one person sitting there posting the posts, setting up the systems, and then you have your employees participating because you want it to look active, right? So then you have people in there answering questions on the forums, responding back to social media requests, or helping to submit to the newsletter that's going to go out to everyone. Those are all different ways that you have to leverage the rest of the company just to even make it successful. And usually you'll probably be around one, maybe two, maybe three, a small handful of different mediums. But you're only going to, your primary is one, and then you kind of syndicate to the others. Those are kind of what people think of when they're just getting started. So this is just a sizing guide. If you're on a medium size, then you might have one or two community managers, like a head community manager and an assistant community manager, or someone in charge of Instagram, someone in charge of Twitter, someone's on the forum, and then someone's on TikTok or something like that. And then you have employees helping or liking, but they're not the primary source of some of the content and interactions. And so you're kind of fostering that. People are interacting with the community and helping with answering forum requests or any types of questions, or responding to the comments in the comment section of the different types of mediums. And then you're able to spread out and do more outlets of community. And then if you're a large organization, you're of course going to have like a whole team of community managers. You're going to have minimum employee participating it, meaning that they opt into it. It's not something their manager's telling them to do. Then you're able to have all these different mediums to participate. So you'll have video, you'll have audio, you'll have still pictures, you'll have blog posts, you'll have all the different ways that you can participate in these communities. So this should help you figure out where your company is or where you are. You're in one of these. And when you're in a community, you're probably going to need to follow this flow organically. So if you have a ton of money, don't jump straight here. Start here and then grow here. Because if you hire all these people and then you're on all these different mediums, you don't know necessarily which ones are paying off, which ones are worth investing in, and you'll either have like depreciation, meaning like you'll just stop supporting one of these mediums, or you have a layoff and you have to let someone go, and then someone else has to take on the work, even though you're structured to have them separated, and you're kind of figuring out how to shrink. It's always going to be a little bit easier to grow through pain rather than to shrink through pain. So when you are starting, start small before you go large. Or crawl, walk, then run. So figure out how you get your balance. Then you can start walking, and then you can start sprinting. Just going back really quickly, these are some of the things that I mentioned before, and I separated them into the crawl, walk, run, depending on the expertise and what you're learning about the community. So social media is going to be a crawl. You can start doing broadcasts, start responding back to people. You can do your newsletter. One person can manage that, and then respond to those in the Q&A section, and then highlight people. You can do events, because one person can show up and bring a team of people, and then you just try to have them meet each other, but also you can meet as many people as you can. In the walk, you can have Slack, but then you're going to have like almost 24-hour visibility. You want to be able to have like somewhat of an SLA for each of these different things. You can also have larger events with more people. And then once you are able to get the walk done, then you can move over to the run side. And you can do those high-level ambassador programs like I talked about. Your company's going to be huge, so now you have to do internal groups and communities so that they're all on the same page. Then you have to do user groups, because now you need to scale out your growth to other people who can bring out those messages, bring other people in, and bring them into the community. Those are all different ways that you can think of just the size of the community. And figure out how you can map on where you are based on that trajectory. And then once again, you can probably think about these in different ways, like move over Slack to the crawl stage possibly. But then you have to think about if you can support it, or if that's the medium, or do they need Discord. But understanding where people are is where you're going to help to see if these will be successful. And you intrinsically should know some of this information as you get started. And it's the reason, and you're going to start making a lot of mistakes in this phase, and then refining, and then perfecting as you go through. Okay. Where do you start? Each one of these sections that I mentioned, the crawl, walk, run, those are restarting. You're going to learn something with each progression. But if you haven't started already, where do you even get started? So how do you even think about this from mechanically from the way that you get started? You identify your target audience. Where are they in the funnel? Are you looking to have community members of people who've never heard of you? Are you looking to have community members from people who are deep in and they want to level up on their understanding? And think about the cold start problem. All right, you have absolutely no information. Where do you start? How do you get that information? Look at just the signal. What are typical people in that industry doing? What are they using? How are they gathering? What kind of feedback do you get from your customer base in terms of complaints? People who don't renew, who does renew, who's sending you proactive questions without them asking you? Use that to funnel your existing community. And when you can re-engage your community. If it's like someone has a Facebook group, someone has a LinkedIn group, you can go in there, talk to them, and try to go where they are before having to bring them into your own community. And then last but not least, self-selection. So make sure when I talked about that thick border, make sure that's clear about who's in your community, what you're targeting and what your community is for, and then allow the people who find and self-select and self-identify those values to come into your community. Thank you for your time.